Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this special on-the-road edition of the Dudes and Beer podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host. Tonight, we will be talking about the importance of pop culture to society, the way pop culture moves society, the way society has changed since pop culture as we know it really came about. But before we get into that, do not forget that the Dudes and Beer podcast is now brought to you by Audible. If you're a fan of reading like I am, you like being able to sit back and read a book, but just don't have time anymore, myself being on the road, just don't have time to turn a leaf. So I tried out Audible. It's great. You get 30 free days with their trial. Go to audibletrial.com/dudes to get your 30 free days and 2 free audio downloads. Once again, that is audibletrial.com/dudes. Tonight with me on the podcast is my awesome wife and host of the Yes But Why podcast on the HC Universal Network, Amy Jordan. How you doing, Amy?
I'm doing very good. Driving a car.
Yeah, we are literally in an on-the-road situation on an on-the-road episode.
Well, we were on tour-ish.
Yeah, well, I mean, not really ish. You were in Houston for 3 days for Comic Palooza this year. I was there, unfortunately, just for the one day. But, yeah, I mean, it got us to thinking, like, pop culture. You know, like, what is pop culture? Like, so many, we go to a lot of cons, we go to a lot of things like this, but, what is pop culture as we know it, and how does it actually move society? How does it move society along? How does it change the memes of society, the way society works? What would you define as pop culture, Amy?
Well, I think it's probably anything we're consuming, because I think the technology has changed a lot of what we consume, but it's still pop culture. Because like video games are pop culture, and even memes, like in a social media kind of way, that's pop culture. I would say anything that we're consuming: TV, movies, comic books, books, like in the Audible sense, you know.
Yeah.
Though I think they do comic booky kind of things as well. But
they do.
Then also pretty much just anything that's going to change the way we look at the world that is viral. Like that idea of what goes viral. If something goes viral, no matter what it is, even if I don't understand why it's interesting, it's pop culture. Like, for instance, we were talking this weekend about like the YouTube videos of people opening gifts. I don't understand why that's a thing, but it's definitely pop culture, and it definitely is going to someday explain something about the world that we live in.
Yeah, and I guess that's really what I would define as pop culture as well. You know, is what is moving society? What is society talking about? You know, I mean, I guess the technical definition, popular culture. What's going on right now? What is it, as you might say? And I guess really, pop culture as we know it really probably began in our parents' generation, you know, late 40s, early 50s, something like that.
What do you mean? What do you mean pop culture as we know it? Pop culture is like what people listen to. People in the 40s and 50s didn't not listen to stuff.
Oh, no, they listened to stuff. And I mean, absolutely, pop culture, like you said a second ago, has to do with how we consume things as well, which is why pop culture changes so rapidly and drastically for us nowadays.
Yeah, like back in the day, it was like radio shows.
Well, yeah.
Or they went out to see stuff. Now it's more internet or stuff that you can choose. Now you can pick and choose.
Yeah. Well, and that's just not just that, but it's made on the daily, as opposed to our parents' and grandparents' generation, where you were listening to radio shows, like you said, maybe reading a regular columnist, maybe reading something from like Norman Rockwell, for instance, would be a fantastic representation of pop culture. Norman Rockwell and the way he captured an image of society, a moment in society, very much was a way that people filtered the way they thought about American society.
Were Norman Rockwell drawings in like newspapers?
Oh yeah, no, he did. He did illustrations for Life magazine.
Oh, I've only ever seen them like framed.
yeah, but I mean, most of those were pieces that were made for ads, pieces that were made for centerpieces for newspaper articles, that kind of stuff. He did a lot of other work as well. Bless you.
Oh yes, our third guest tonight is our son Dalbus.
Yes.
A tiny child, just turned 2, and if he talks, you won't understand it, but we'll have to address it. So, wanted to let you know that was going to happen potentially. Okay, so a second ago you said pop culture, quote, as we know it, started in the 40s and 50s. What do you mean by that? Because clearly you have an idea of what you're trying to, like the idea of what that means to you. So
that's when the marketing craze as we know it really took over. That's when like the Mad Men era started coming about. The era of large advertising. The era of like Babe Ruth backing big Beech Nut Chew. And Beech Nut Chew became popular because Babe Ruth used it. That kind of stuff.
So you think at that point, pop culture was influenced by advertising and what they told you to like?
Well, at that point, I think that's where we started drawing a line as to when pop culture became. I mean, if Marilyn Monroe drove a Corvette, that's what people wanted. Whether Corvette was fast or not, it may have just come out.
Well, you know what, then? If that's part of your parameters, I find it very interesting that right now, it's more of a wide open market. Like, yeah, sure, there are still celebrity advertisements saying, hey, I do this, so you should buy it. And yes, people buy stuff like that. But there's also so many other things. And I also feel like...
Good Lord, figure out a Lincoln commercial. All I know is that Matthew McConaughey's in it. And he's driving a car. It's a real nice car. Sometimes I take it to go cash a check.
But what I'm saying is, I just don't think... Dalbus felt the same about that impression.
Sorry, I don't do a good McConaughey.
Yeah, no, so. See, no, it's not great. It's not great at all. But I hear what you're saying with reference to like pop stars like having their effect on it, but I still don't think pop culture is just what they say.
No. It's a way through which we filter society. It's a way that we filter the way that we look at the world. Like I said, to see someone that you idolize using something tends to make you want to do that. That's why celebrities just get stuff for free.
You know, what's interesting is that I really thought you were going to say comic books.
We're getting there.
Well, because you said 40s and 50s, and so you said, and when you say comic books, what I was going to say with reference both to that time and the emergence of comic books and with the end of the, in like 1998 through the beginning of the millennium, with the resurgence of the comic book sort of situation, I think in both instances, they were a reaction to war, to a time when the future was uncertain and we weren't really sure how we were going to make it through. There were wars to be dealt with, and that was scary. And like, for instance, we had 9/11 around that time. in the latter years, and both of those inspired the comic book artists to come out with these heroes to say, hey, check out these heroes who can help solve, your problems by, reading what they do, and they can help you feel empowered and confident and get through it.
Sure. And that's definitely there. Like I said, pop culture is something that we use to filter society. It is a filter. Whenever you look at what's going on, like you said earlier in our conversation, whenever we were driving before we started recording, the fact that what is Dalbus's generation going to think about the way that we did things? And
like podcasting.
If you go back and you look at podcasting, just the way that is, like, good Lord, man, they just let anybody have a microphone and talk? Mm-hmm. Are you serious right now? That's the way it was? It was just like the Wild West of media? Okay. We don't know. We don't know. Like, right now, what we're doing is pop culture. And
sure.
it is a filter through which you can see society and how society reacts to things. Now, when you're talking about comic books, definitely pop culture is pervasive through that. Most comic books happen like in the modern day of whatever time that is. So whenever you saw comic books from the 60s, like, you saw issues going on in the 60s going on in them, you saw a lot of civil rights comic books, that kind of stuff. A lot of civil rights themes going on. That's when X-Men first came about, where it was a multicultural team of superheroes. So there's a really interesting way in which pop culture and actual culture kind of weave together and support each other. And one is descriptive of the other. Like, pop culture is very descriptive as to what's going on
as an
in
example,
the world around it.
I remember when Trump won the election, the people in my arts community, people who do theater and stuff, were like, oh man, the only thing I can hope is that it will inspire great art.
Yeah.
That the reaction.
This is how we got the frogs. That
this negative thing that they felt about it would actually inspire new art. And I think it has done a lot to inspire a lot of reaction. It's like, hell no, we're not accepting this again, so we're changing it. So a lot of things in culture have changed, and a lot of things in pop culture have changed. But realistically, the other thing, pop culture, part of me feels like pop culture got us here, because we have gotten to the point where we love the villain. Like, I legitimately went to go buy, when I was trying to buy a gift for one of our nephews, turned 10. I wanted to get a Star Wars thing. I was looking at Star Wars stuff. You know that all the Star Wars stuff is just the villains?
Yeah.
Everything that's available to buy.
Even at the Comic-Con, what's there? The 501st.
Just the villains. We love the villains. We want to. We're more interested in the villains than we are the heroes. If that's the case, pop culture, then real life is going to feed into that.
Scarface.
And that's how we got Lex Luthor as our president. That's what we wanted. We've been putting it out there. You gotta start loving the heroes. You gotta be happy with their happy journey. For too many years, people were like, oh man, these endings are too easy. Everyone's happy. That's not real life. Okay. So then they showed you real life, and it was like,
real life is horrible. Stop.
Yeah.
Stop. Put the Band-Aid back on.
Yeah, exactly. But, I feel like you can see, if you pay attention, you can see lots of little things, like things that get inspired.
Sure.
I'd be fascinated, and I wish we had anyone that understood the gift wrap opening thing. Because I'm sure that means something. I'm sure it has to do with something in our culture, for sure.
Imagine a future where that's the only video that's been found.
Oh, right?
Is just like a 5-hour-long loop that somebody made of this kid opening presents, and that's the only media that exists anymore. Like, you got to put yourself
like,
in a Twilight Zone type
Tyler
scenario.
was their god.
Yes.
And they enjoyed when he was happy, so they gave him gifts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually wow.
And you hear like 20,000 people in unison, "This is for you, Tyler."
And they all open gifts together.
For Tyler. For Tyler.
Wow. That's how they started doing offerings.
Burning a large gift in effigy, like, but that's the thing.
That's comedy gold right there.
Where does pop culture take you? And that's it. That's the rabbit hole that we're going down. And that's what's crazy is that, like we're saying, pop culture is an absolute lens through which you can see a culture. And for us to go back and look at the pop culture of our parents, to go back and look at old John Wayne movies and stuff like that, things that were pervasive. Look at old lunchboxes, and you can see what was pervasive going on in the culture of both adults, all kinds of stuff. It's just interesting to me to see how something like Comic-Con can spur this conversation and can even be a representation of what is going on culturally. Because, comic books cover what's going on in the real world around us.
Well, Comic-Cons, Comic-Palooza specifically, are not just about comic books anymore.
No.
They're about movies and books and artwork and, certain characters that empower us and television shows. All sorts of different kinds of things. There were people doing science. There was the NASA exhibit and all the panels that they had. All sorts of arts and theater. I taught improv workshops. There was a stage combat group.
Yeah.
There definitely were a lot of different, and plus the podcasters, there was tons of that.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself was a pop culture sort of the breadth and width of what would be pop culture was represented at that convention this weekend.
Oh yeah, most definitely. From gamers to and that's just it. Looking at events like South by Southwest, the way that has branched out to incorporate different forms of art, even digital art, in the world of interactive.
Oh, that's not even just about art. That's about business and education and technology.
Yeah.
Oh, that South by Southwest is way wider than the Comic-Cons. Comic-Cons, I would say in general, have all the things I mentioned that were at Comic-Palooza. It's just expected now that you cover all of those topics. But as far as South by Southwest and other bigger conferences that have been going on, usually that started with music, the music ones tend to go tech. The music doesn't tend to go comic book. Music lends itself to align with tech, I think because music's at night. And they were like, we rented this convention center. What are we going to do during the day? So they found the tech guys, and turns out they've become pretty good at doing speeches about their tech. So they get them in there.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. So speaking of people telling speeches about tech, how much do you think the new culture of tech, what we decide we like, is based on the person telling the story? In the same way that all the things that we're talking about at the Comic-Con are stories that we are telling and being told, that we filter both the world that we have around us and the history of our world through these characters. In the same way, technology is being presented to us in a storytelling format by these leaders, by these black turtleneck leaders that are, the face of their company.
Yeah.
And if some guy was just a schmo, that technology is not going to catch. Nobody cares about that guy. You got to be interesting. I find that with all the things throughout the convention. everybody that I talked to, everybody that I felt like connected with, they had a spiel. They were like, "Hi, how you doing?" They were like really out there and active. So I don't know. Pop culture is what people like, but it's also what people are pushing.
All right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I can definitely see that, and that's one reason why I made the analogy for advertising.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And
well, that's
and
what made
why
me think of it. I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because they're the ones trying to change culture in order to incorporate their item to where people tie it with culture.
Yeah.
You know, like how many times did you hear back in the 80s, "Hold on, let me put my face on"? You know, because we had a whole generation of women that before they left had to beautify themselves. Not so much anymore since the furtherance of the women's lib movement into the 80s, into the 90s, things like that, where it was like, nope, natural's fine. I don't have to wear makeup.
Oh yeah, it changes the way we accept the way we put ourselves out there. It's almost similar, though this sounds very anti-feminist of me to say, but I'm gonna say it because that's not what I mean. So that's why I gave the disclaimer. But it reminds me of the oh crap! Now I've lost my train of thought. Damn it! There was some clothing. Oh, the principal that yelled at the parents for not wearing proper clothes to pick up their kids or to come to parent-teacher conferences.
Yes.
What we wear used to be fancy when we left the house. When we got in, airplanes or went to kids' graduations. We were dressed up. We were in suits. We don't do that anymore.
Well, not just that,
we were a dressed-down situation.
Well, and
that's why I thought people would get mad, because natural face is not dressed down. It's different, and in this case, it's a different kind of argument.
Well, and the argument that principal made was that it's hard for me to command respect from your children.
Yeah.
And teach them how to respect people in this way when you're not respecting the situation. When you're not respecting the situation of coming to school to talk about your children enough to take the curlers out of your hair, how do you expect your children to respect school?
But I think that's all about pop culture. The in and the out of it.
It's very much. Very much.
When we as a community, as a culture, decide it's fine to wear leggings everywhere, then that's a decision, and that affects other things. Yep. It's like, okay, well, now I guess we don't have to dress up for this. Well, now I guess we don't do this. It just changes the way we look at the world. The past, some people are like, oh, I can't believe it. It's just the way things change. Now, as far as the things that we consume, the movies, the TV, the radio, that kind of stuff, the stories, what do you think about that? What do you think, how have they changed since the beginning of your 40s, 50s, line that you're drawing for advertising?
I think that movies have been able to be much more vocal than they once were. At one point, if you were trying to put a message across, you had to do it with some subterfuge. You know, you had to do it with a little bit of finesse in the background, kind of like if you watch the movie Pinocchio with an understanding of Hollywood history, you would know that Pinocchio at the time in Hollywood, there was going on a huge strike in Hollywood. And if you start going through and seeing that, you can see all these underlying currents in the story of Pinocchio and the way it's written and the way that the characters tie together. It's like, wow, this is a very anti-union film that's really wild. And if you remember, the movies like that were not made for children, folks. Pinocchio was not released for children. It was released for adults. adults watched cartoons. If you go back and watch the old Bugs Bunny and stuff like that, those came on before like Westerns and before like Gone with the Wind. Kids weren't going to see Gone with the Wind.
I hardly wanted to watch Gone with the Wind.
So even if you watch some of the old Bugs Bunny and stuff like that, you get some very interesting ways that morality tales happen. You get some very interesting twists on racial relations, all kinds of things. And I think now movies are able to be much more vocal and open.
And direct about their message?
Absolutely direct. I think many of them still use some of the, like, for instance, a prime example is Iron Man 3. They very much used the concept of the false flag in Iron Man 3 with the Mandarin not being the actual. There was a lot of talk of false flags going on in the news and everything else. And they very much used that in the movie as a means by which to move the story along.
Yeah.
So
plus, Avengers Civil War is a total, like, a microcosm of what was happening politically, Democrat versus Republican at the time. Like, in 20 years, when we watch that movie again, it'll be like, oh my God.
You can't forget, though, that the Civil War movies came out of a series of comic books that was written before that.
Which means history repeats itself, guys. And people making pop culture, keep making your stuff with those stories about what's going on right now, because it's going to happen again in 50 years, and it's going to be relevant again.
Exactly. And it's the fact of pop culture is the easiest way to be able to put a message out there and have it stay out there for generations.
You know, can I ask a question about this?
People will be doing meme dances for, 20, 30 years now. Stuff like that. Go ahead.
I was going to ask about the way that you think about pop culture, because in the day back in the day when what came out on the radio or what came out on the television was so limited that everybody was watching the same thing on the same night at the same time.
Yeah.
The idea of pop culture and its direct both effect and influence by culture is obvious because everyone was doing everything the same. Yeah. But now...
That's what scared people about Elvis, was that there was only one show people were tuned into when they saw his pelvis start doing that, and that was Ed Sullivan. That was the only show on. That's what everybody watched. And then suddenly you see this lascivious dance going on.
Oh, sure. Well, that's the FCC's problem. But I don't even know if the FCC was a thing at the time. But you know what I mean? What I'm saying is now there's so much more to choose from. Mm-hmm. Would you consider, in pop culture, does the pop matter? Meaning, is pop culture only made up of what is popular? And then, in a subset of that question, what is popular? Because there are so many television shows and so many movies that each one of them could potentially make millions and millions of dollars, do well based on how much money they spent and stuff, but still a big percentage of people haven't seen it, because, there's so many things. So what, do you think it's anything that people make, even if it's not the most popular thing?
No.
Or is it like the thing that everybody's talking about, or what?
But
what are the parameters?
Well, I mean, pop culture is something that impacts society enough that, like I said, it's a filter on how you see society. Memes, for instance, that take over. Phrases that take over. Like, awesome to the max.
No one says that.
I know. Not anymore.
No, you're right. I guess you're right. To the max was definitely
to
like
the max was an
90s, like Save the
that
Bell,
was an 80s
Saved by the
thing.
Bell thing.
It was 80s.
Okay.
To the max.
To the max.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose so. But back even in the 80s, it was what everybody watched the same thing. Now
Sure.
it's different. Now it's like, if something gets 1 million views, is it pop culture, or does it have to have 6 billion views? Do people have to parody a thing that happens?
It's more the attention that it gets. Does it have longevity? Does it stay around? Does it have staying power? You know, that's what I mean, is that with the lens of society, because like the kid that opens presents has been all over shows. He's been everywhere.
It's not just one kid.
I know.
It's a lot of different kids.
It started with one.
But see, the idea of that, in my mind, the idea of that is, if it did start with one guy and now more people are doing it, are every one of those people who are parodying it part of pop culture as well?
Yes.
So
they're participating in it.
Okay. I don't know. I'm just trying to think from a creator's perspective.
Yeah.
Like, what level of exposure does what I'm making have to affect culture?
When you can write a show and it can be on TV, but when the head character, like Alex P. Keaton, starts showing up on the cover of every Teen Beat magazine.
Again, you're talking about the 80s.
I'm talking
about right now.
That's the circumstance that makes him pop culture.
Okay.
Is that he becomes pervasive.
Okay. Like, for instance, Walking Dead is so pop culture that when Rick isn't around, people are upset.
Commercials are made in the style of Walking Dead.
Yes, okay.
It's pop culture.
It exists in and of itself, and there are also things inspired by it.
Exactly.
That are mirrors of it and stuff like that. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean...
Hammer pants. Pop culture.
You know what's interesting about Walking Dead as an example of pop culture is that, similarly to what you were saying earlier about how the comic book that is the plot of Civil War was written long before when it came out as a movie, and yet somehow the politics were the same. Similarly, when Walking Dead was written, that guy was like in college. Long before it got picked up and made into a television show, he wrote a lot of that stuff. And almost people who read the comic book will say that it's similar. There's a lot of similar things, to the point where the messages, the overarching ideas were from the past. And I always think about how Walking Dead is such a fascinating example of pop culture in our current time, because it's about end of times. It's about dealing with the toughest stuff. And what are we worried about? Like, why are we putting that out? Why is that a show we want to watch? Yeah. What do you think?
I keep saying that it's gonna end like Dallas.
What do you mean?
The whole, like, Bobby Ewing's dead. No, it was a dream.
Oh,
it was a dream.
You think it's going to be somebody's dream? No, it's not a dream, because it's an existing thing. Like, it's not going to have that surprise ending, because the comic books are written. You can read them.
Oh, I know.
It's out there.
I know.
But what I mean is, why would, regardless of that, what does this idea of, this end of times, zombies, and also, like, not being able to trust people, alliances, like all the topics that are under what Walking Dead is are clearly things that we are actively interested in thinking about. Which means that in our culture, we fear or are obsessed with something. Like, for instance, not only Walking Dead, but there's also all this, like, doomsday prepper kind of stuff.
Sure.
What's up with that? What does that mean about culture? Tell me what you think.
Well, I think, I mean, that's been going on for a long, long time. the prepper scenario, and that's people that are convinced by the signs that they see around them that the government is getting ready to fall, and that we're going to be in a state of emergency. That it's going to turn into a zombie type situation. And people thought that long before Walking Dead came about. Walking Dead and things like that have definitely raised the stakes on that. To the point where there are shows about it, and raised awareness of the communities around that were into that. So
okay, but what I'm talking about is this. What I'm talking about is the idea of like, what do you think? I think that it's interesting that people are trying to save the world, right? But that means that they feel like the world needs to be saved. You know what I mean? Like in the same way that the hero stuff comes up when we need a hero. When we feel like we can't handle our life, we go to a hero story. And that makes us feel better.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I wonder what, and I don't honestly know. I mean, I have theories, but I wonder what this dire, terrible universe, how it makes us feel better. Is it like, well, at least I have a roof over my head and I'm not worried if my neighbors are going to kill me? I don't know if it's that huge or if it's smaller enough to think like, you know, I'm going to work better to be a more trustworthy person because I see how terrible it is to live in a world where people aren't trustworthy. It's hard to know. But I think it's fascinating that that show has gone on. And they have intentions to put that show on for multiple, like 10, 15 more years.
Yeah.
That is wild. That the idea that we think that idea of this dark, terrible show will be relevant to us in our culture for that long. I don't know. It's just a super weird thing. Like, you know, shows about families, they ebb and flow because families ebb and flow.
Sure.
But, you know, this weird dark thing, what does that say about us? What does that say about pop culture in general?
Well, and you definitely have to wonder just with the power of intent alone. That was one of the many things that Wes Craven actually worried about whenever he wrote Nightmare on Elm Street and put it on film, was that him putting that much fear into that many people created what in magic is called an egregore. Something that like is created from a mass mind in order to do something, and he believed that is what took over the Night Stalker. The Night Stalker said something came and took over him, and that's why he started killing. And he was like, I think maybe my movie like created something that took somebody over. And
wait,
you know,
there was a murderer that happened because of the Nightmare on Elm Street?
That's Wes Craven. They happened. The Night Stalker came out right as Nightmare on Elm Street came out.
Oh, and then Wes Craven took credit for him?
Wes Craven was like, because it was all over the place. It was wild.
Yeah.
And it was strange how here's this dude whose backstory, all right? And this is a prime example of pop culture gone like, what? Freddy Krueger ended up with a TV show that was kind of like Twilight Zone, where he was the host, Freddy's Nightmares. He ended up being like one of the favorite things to go as for Halloween is for kids. The guy's backstory is that he was a child toucher who the parents killed. And then he came back to exact revenge by killing their children in their dreams. And this is what kids are dressing up as for Halloween. This is what parents are buying. I want to be a child toucher who's burned to death. That's what I want to be for Halloween. Okay, kid.
Good job. Here's your costume.
And that's where it went.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
Yeah, I guess I think
you
we're
want to talk a lens on society.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Really?
So, you know, like, when you start psychologically...
I guess we always like the villain.
breaking down the way that society works and absorbs this stuff and takes it in and processes it. Like, yeah, the question that's raised in Batman Dark Knight, where randomly there are all these dudes dressing as Batman going out and avenging the night. Will we have that? Will that happen because of all these comic book movies? Will we end up with a world of Kick-Ass where people are just putting on soccer gear and going out and going Casey Jones like from the Ninja Turtles?
I think so.
And beating people down? Exacting their revenge and their justice and avenging people? That's yet to be seen, but
I don't know if that. But it's hard to know if one begets the other.
Is that what we're putting out there?
Like, would that be the fault of the pop culture, or would the culture already have it in it, and the storytellers who are just soaking up the same culture everyone is tell the story, and that's what
The question is, how fast do we as a society become desensitized to where we have completely embraced the evil?
I don't know what that means. What do you mean, embrace the evil?
To where we're letting 8-year-olds dress up like Freddy Krueger, the child toucher. Where that's okay. Where we've lost we've lost that idea. I'm
gonna be honest. When I was a kid, I didn't see the movies. I didn't see it till I was an adult, and I did. I saw all the toys and all the costumes, and I saw people dressing up, and I just didn't know what that was. Okay, but I think the 80s were hard and crazy because I was not involved with that. But my first boy-girl party was a Halloween party, and I dressed up as Madonna. And as many of you might know, my age puts me right at the place where my Madonna outfit was the Like a Virgin outfit, which was white lace gloves, lace dress, very risque. And I was 7, and I went in this costume to a party at another 3rd grader's house.
Yeah.
And I remember getting there and all of a sudden realizing that it was inappropriate for me to be wearing what I was wearing. But I didn't know, and my mom didn't think of it. She got me to the party, and all of a sudden I was like, oh no, I should have just been an apple, or
I should have been a ghost.
I should have just worn
should have been a piece of Fruit of the Loom.
No, I dressed up. Yeah, one of the guys was dressed up as a football player. You know what I mean? It was not like. No, but they were young babies, and they were dressed, and I was dressed up as this lacy harlot, and I was like, oh God, but you just don't. I don't know. It was pop culture.
Who feels like a virgin touched for the very first time.
Not that I understood any of that at the time.
Exactly.
But that's the idea. I owned that album.
That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
How at what point is the disconnect?
Oh my God. Yeah, but what are we going to do about our kid? He's probably going to like stuff that's terrible.
Well, you can do, absolutely.
I mean, the world's practically VR porn now.
Movies. I loved horror movies. I still love them. You know this. It's teaching reality. It's teaching the moral lesson along with it.
But does some pop culture take care of that?
It's like, I remember one time a lady in my sociology class was very upset that her 9-year-old son liked watching Batman the Animated Series and Superman. And I was like, okay. She was like, I feel like they're way too violent. And I'm like, you're right. The cartoons we watched were not violent at all. I never once saw a mouse slap a cat in the face with a cactus. I never once saw...
Or an iron frying pan.
Yeah, I never once saw a duck get shot in the face with a shotgun or have swallow a piece of dynamite,
Yeah, and explode to a million pieces.
She's like, well, I guess they were violent, but I was like, but we didn't go out and stick our fingers in the ends of shotguns, right? It's like, you expect your kid to go out and avenge the night? Is that what you expect? That your kid has that total disconnect between reality and fantasy so much that he's going to go out and try to fly off the roof?
Here's the thing, though. I kind of worry that right now there is a disconnect. That there's so much stuff out there that there's no way to get around it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely, and that's what we talk about on this show all the time, is filtering information. You've got to learn to filter. There's so much information out there. You've got to learn to have critical thinking skills. You've got to be able to do that. And that's what helps you see the way that pop culture echoes society. Society is moved by pop culture. Everything else. And thank you, Amy, for coming on tonight, talking about this. It's something that we talk about frequently in our home. Because we have a young child, and I watch a lot of movies,
and we also create stuff too.
Yeah,
so
we're content. We're content creators, and we want to make sure that we're curating something properly. That whenever we're put something out there, that it's not something that is detrimental in any way to society. But is rather something that opens the conversation to society, helps open and widen the lens a little bit more through which we can glean light. So, thank you so much for coming on, Amy.
Thanks. Good talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel great about it. Yeah.
Tell everybody where they can go to check things out.
Oh, well, of course, if you want to listen to the Yes But Why podcast,
and you should,
go to yesbutwhypodcast.com.
Uh-huh.
That is a great, great place to listen to it. Also, you can listen to it if you go to hcuniversalnetwork.com. You can hear both of these shows there, as well as a host of lots of others. Super great stuff happening over there for sure.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like this is a good deep dive into why we're doing stuff, and also makes me feel a bit more cognizant of how my next project, how to pick my next project, what do I want to put out there. There's lots of things that interest me, but which is actually going to enrich the world,
and what do you want to highlight that's already out there.
Sure.
And while you're online checking that out and checking out what you can highlight in the world out there, folks, make sure to stop on by dudesandbeer.com. That's where you can check out all the episodes, the Knowledge Vault. That is where you can get your great deals on CBD. Just check out our link to diamondcbd.com and use the code DUDES420 at checkout to save a whopping 30% off your entire cart. Talk to your doctor, folks. Believe it or not, I was just prescribed CBD by my doctor. It was put on a recommendation sheet. So I was like, hot diggity. Go check it out, diamondcbd.com. Code DUDES420. Until next time, everybody, remember, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and if you can't be good at it. Woo! We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Podcast. To listen to our audio streams or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.